Slide canceling is back in Call of Duty MW3, and that will include Warzone when MW3 integrates with Warzone in December of this year. In this video, I'm going to give you guys some tips on how to slide cancel, but most importantly on when and why we slide cancel to help you win more gunfights in Call of Duty. So number one, slide canceling is done exactly the same way it was back in Modern Warfare 19, Warzone 1, and basically the last several Call of Duties before MW2. It's done by first sprinting, which is usually pressing L3 on your controller or whatever it is for your mouse and keyboard, and then rapidly pressing crouch, crouch, jump. On PlayStation, this is going to be circle, circle, X, and on Xbox, this will be BBA. And then if you're on mouse and keyboard, it'll be something like shift, shift, space, or CC space, depending on how you have your keybind set up. The first crouch initiates the slide. The second time you press crouch will stop the slide, and then pressing the jump button will get you back into sprinting. A few things I want to point out here that are differences from this slide cancel to previous Call of Duties. There does seem to be a very slight delay from when you start sprinting to until it'll allow you to do a slide cancel. It is very minimal, but I did notice it. Now there are a pair of tactical pad boots, which are basically like how the new perk system works. Instead of perks, you have equipment. These boots say that they are going to increase the slide distance and also increase the transition speeds of stances. So I'm wondering if that will kind of reduce that delay. Now you can also aim while sliding. If you're not wearing the tactical pads, you can slide and aim your gun, but your guy's going to do it at kind of like a canted look where he aims down the side of the gun. If you're using the tactical pad boots or perks, then you can actually fully aim down sights with your gun while sliding. And there is no delay here. You can do it basically as soon as you start sliding. Now, before we go any farther here, we need to discuss a few things about your button layout on your controller on how to slide cancel. So the majority of people out there are probably playing with like a default PlayStation or Xbox controllers. They don't have any additional buttons on like the back of the controller. The problem with this is in order to slide cancel, you have to take your right thumb off of the analog stick to press circle or B, and you basically can't adjust your aim while you're doing the slide cancel. And this is going to cause a major problem when I talk about how to actually effectively use the slide cancel later in the video. Now there are a few things we can do to fix this or solve this, even if you're on a completely normal controller. The first one is going to be playing claw, and this is awkward for some people. This involves using your right index finger and using it to touch all the buttons on the top right of your controller here. It's a little bit awkward to hold. Personally, I do not like this at all, but there's a lot of great players out there and even pro players that do play this style. The benefit of this is, of course, you can hit these buttons and we don't have to take our thumb off the analog stick. Now, if you don't want to learn that, if that's just too uncomfortable, well, you can go into our button layout settings here, and the one that I would recommend is going to be bumper jumper tactical, because what this does is it's going to make our slide or crouch R3 by pressing our right analog stick, and jump is going to be L1 actually. So we can do R3, R3, L1 in order to do a slide cancel, and we never have to take our thumb off the analog stick again. Of course, this is going to be a little bit awkward to learn and retrain your brain, because this is probably completely different than what you've played with other button layouts. But this is the probably most effective button layout to do it if you don't have a custom controller. Now, the final option, which is ultimately probably going to be the easiest for most people, but it will cost you some money, unfortunately, and that is to have a custom controller that has back buttons or paddles. So I am using a custom PS5 controller by AIM Controllers, and I have 4 paddles on the back of this controller. So you can remap these to whatever you want, but I have mine as my circle, circle, jump. So it's bam, bam, bam to slide cancel. This is triangle and this is square as well. You don't need a controller with 4 paddles per se. It's nice, but 2 is kind of the minimum of what you need to do this effectively. Now, one thing I will say, there are a few third-party sources out there, like on Amazon, that you can get attachments that will go onto your PlayStation or Xbox controller and will give you paddles. I don't know how well these work, to be completely honest. They are third-party. They're not made by Sony or Xbox. The only way to get paddles on those controllers is you would have to buy an actual like custom Xbox, like a Xbox Elite or PS5. I think it makes a new one. Things like that. Now, one thing I'll really quickly say about the controllers here is there's a lot of different brands out there for custom controllers. I've used several of them, but AIM has by far been my favorite for a few reasons. Number one, I feel like the paddles are by far the most comfortable and responsive. They're very easy to remap as well. Plus, all of their controllers come with the digital tap trigger, so it's like a mouse click for that L2, R2, and you can turn that on and off with the switch of a button, and it works very well. So if you want to play like a racing game where you have that full trigger pull, you can do that very easily on and off. Plus they come with different stick height. So I play with a taller right stick. It's kind of like having a control freak on there. It gives you more room and an area to kind of be precise with your aiming. And finally, the most important, it has a lifetime warranty on all modded parts on the controller, and they can guarantee a 10-day build time. So if you are interested in getting a controller, it's probably the best investment you can make if you're serious about improving your game, especially your movement. Aimcontrollers.com. If you use code TCaptainX, it's $55 off as long as you spend $199 or more. So that drops it well below $150. It is a decent amount of money, but it's probably your best bet if you want to be serious about getting better. Okay, so now that we have the whole button layout and kind of the basics of how to side cancel out of the way, now let's cover why do we side cancel. First, let me point out another thing that is different in MW3 about side canceling. In Warzone 1, we could use side canceling to reset our tactical sprint. So if you timed your side cancels appropriately, your guy would be able to kind of refresh his sprint and do that tactical sprint, which is where his gun's up and they sprint the fastest, and it just allows you to move around the map faster. In MW3, this does not work to reset our tactical sprint. The devs specifically said side canceling will have no effect on resetting your tactical sprint, and your tac sprint is timed more to like, it's linked to an actual timer where you just have to let the time go until you get that tactical sprint back. So with that out of the way, the main reason we're going to be side canceling in Call of Duty now is to aggressively challenge people around corners. So let's say I'm going to be going through a doorway or around a wall, around a corner where I expect an enemy is going to be on the other side. If I just walk straight through, turn, and aim my gun, I'm a very easy target to hit because I'm slow and steady moving through. Not very hard for my opponent to track me, shoot me. However, if I very quickly, aggressively slide cancel through that doorway or around that wall, now I'm a very fast and moving target, and I'm much more difficult to hit for my opponent. And basically, it allows you to challenge around these corners where someone is just sitting there camping on you, and it gives you a chance to still win these gunfights. And if we time this correctly, especially in a more close quarter situation, we can also use side canceling to break cameras. What it means to break your opponent's camera is basically when you go across your opponent's viewing path or viewing angle so quickly, where you go through it and out of it, where they have to now turn around and find you again. That is called breaking a camera. If you're on the receiving end of this, it's very disorienting because you lose them, you have to adjust and find them again. If you're the one who's doing the camera breaking or the slide canceling effectively, you're almost always going to win these gunfights when you do this against your opponent because you can still see your opponent if you do it properly. Now, in order to break cameras, there is a little bit of luck involved, but it's really all about timing. What you want to be able to do is to slide and come around that corner just before they come around the corner. Because as they start to look one way, you're going to slide under and past them, and they're going to you're going to catch across their screen, and then they have to turn and adjust. You can try to use audio cues to have a better sense of where that player is, but there is a little bit of a luck component of the timing to this sometimes. Now, the next most important thing about side canceling is centering. And if you don't center properly with your side cancel, you might as well not do it. So in case you don't know, centering is a term that we use to describe how when you walk around the map, you want to have your center dot or your reticle centered on an area where an enemy is most likely to be. So let's say I'm walking through a hallway and there's a door at the end of the hallway, or I'm walking through a corridor and there is like the edge of a wall where a player can come down a new lane. I want to have my center dot centered roughly at chest level, right close to that corner or in the center of that doorway where a player is most likely to appear. That way, if they do appear there, all I have to do is aim and shoot my gun. If my centering is bad, meaning my aim is like low on the ground or high, or it's off to the side, now if they come there, I have to first adjust my aim and then aim and shoot. So when we slide through a doorway or around a wall, it's very important that as we're coming around that corner, we're starting to adjust and turn our aim to look down the direction that we think an enemy is going to be. You don't want to just slide cancel straight through and then turn. You don't want to be like a robot. You have to come around smoothly. And that's where having paddles makes doing this so much easier, because we don't have to take our thumb off that analog stick. I would argue that this is probably the hardest part of slide canceling effectively, is doing it in a manner where you're doing it smoothly and you center your aim well as you come around. Now, there are a few of those situations where slide canceling can be very effective. It's usually more in Warzone where we have a higher health pool, but it still absolutely works in multiplayer in certain situations. So let's say you're walking somewhere and all of a sudden an enemy like pops out around a corner in front front of you. Like maybe they slide canceled on you, and maybe you weren't quite ready to take on this gunfight. You had bad centering, you were in the middle of a reload, something like that. In a situation like that, you could try to slide cancel to the side or even slide cancel at them to somewhat try to break their camera and force it so they might miss some shots on you. This is most effective in kind of like a reactive situation when you're not ready. If you're already centered and aiming where that character comes around, where your enemy comes around, you're best to probably just shoot them and just go with that. And this is harder to do in multiplayer because it only takes a few shots to kill you. Whereas in Warzone, with a larger health pool, you could force them to miss more shots and give you a chance to win the gunfight. Now, I also want to talk about a few other movement mechanics besides just slide canceling, but a lot of this stuff ties into slide canceling a lot. So the first, instead of slide canceling through a door or around a corner, we could just jump around that corner. So in MW2 and Warzone 2, this was kind of our main method of how to challenge players around corners, was to jump and turn and center our aim. But overall, I think jumping is still a great option. However, we cannot bunny hop or bee hop in MW3 currently. Bunny hopping or bee hopping is simply where you sprint and jump, and then you time your jump right as you land and you keep moving like horizontally. If we try to do an MW3, you can jump again, but your character will stop moving horizontally. You just jump. Overall, I think slide canceling is the more effective mechanic because you are a faster moving target and harder to hit compared to just running and jumping. But jumping is probably the easier mechanic to learn for kind of a little bit more newer players. So you might want to just start with jumping and centering around corners before you move on to slide canceling. You can also tie this into slide canceling by slide canceling and then jumping at the end of the slide cancel. So that way your character goes low and then high. Again, the whole goal of this is to make yourself a moving target and make it as difficult to hit for your enemy. Another thing I want to point out about MW3 is there's much less of a aim down sight speed penalty. So in MW2 and Warzone 2, when you jump and aim your gun, you are much slower to aim your gun while jumping. In MW3, there's not really any penalty for this. So again, jump challenging is still a very effective mechanic to do in MW3. A few other mechanics I want to briefly cover is drop shotting and snaking. Drop shotting has been in Call of Duty for a long time, and essentially drop shotting is where you quickly go from standing to in a prone position to then shoot your opponent. The reason we do drop shotting is because when our character drops down, our enemy now has to adjust his aim in order to shoot you because you just dropped down. However, it's very important that you only do this in very close quarters situations. If you try to drop shot someone from far away, let's say 20 meters or so, your character is only moving a little bit on screen, and it's very easy for your enemy to adjust their aim, and they're going to end up probably hitting headshots on you since you're proning and putting your head at the front of yourself. But let's say an enemy all of a sudden comes around a corner and they are right on you, like within 5 meters or so. If we drop shot, then because we're so close, your enemy now has to adjust their aim much more, and it's a much more effective mechanic to force them to miss shots. Overall, I think drop shotting is much better as a reactive technique and not a proactive technique, whereas slide canceling is more of a proactive technique, something that we do in advance of challenging an opponent. Snaking sort of ties into drop shotting because you have to drop shot in order to snake. Essentially what snaking is rapidly proning and standing up from behind cover. Snaking is beneficial because it allows us to stay mostly behind cover, but as we stand up, we get a sneak peek and we can see what our enemy is doing, and we can see if they start to push so that we can stay up and then shoot them over cover. Overall, I would say snaking is one of the more difficult things to do, and even myself, who plays this game for a living basically, I have trouble doing this very consistently. But a lot of the CDL pros are phenomenal at this technique. It also makes it easier if you use automatic tactical sprint because you can cancel the prone by sprinting forward for a second. So basically, in order to snake, you're gonna prone, sprint forward, and then pull back on your analog stick as you prone. And then you're just gonna keep repeating those three things as you prone and up, prone and up, prone and up. Also, quickly on the topic of automatic tactical sprint, should you turn this on? Overall, I think this is going to be the move, kind of the meta setting, is using automatic tactical sprint, because in MW3, the sprintifier and aim down sight speed times seem a bit faster than what they were in MW2. So it's not as big of a deal if we get caught in a sprint and have to then pull our gun down. So that's gonna wrap things up for today's video. I hope you guys found it helpful. If you like this style of content, these in-depth guides on how to get better at Call of Duty, we do a lot of that stuff on this channel, and my goal is to help you guys get better at the game. So if you're new here, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more stuff just like this. Maybe come check out a live stream here on YouTube as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.